20 furious mares had surrounded 3 hunters, yes, the ones who thought they were doing the hunting. I had only stepped away from my ranch for a few hours, and during that brief window, HOA Karen had the nerve to let strangers onto my land without so much as a heads up. They must have thought it was some kind of public hunting area. Big mistake. The horses picked up the unfamiliar scent instantly, and their protective instincts kicked in like wildfire. In no time, 3 adult men found themselves backed into a corner, their rifles lying useless in the mud, while the mares neighed furiously, their calls echoing through the sky. Karen? She was nowhere to be found, gone like the wind, leaving her guests to face the fury of 20 overprotective mares in full-on mummo bear mode. Everything was caught on camera, every scream, every hoofbeat, every consequence of trespassing where you clearly don't belong. If you live in a neighborhood with a power-hungry hoe, drop a comment below. Let's talk about the mini-dictators who think they run the world. My name's Cooper Sterling, and most folks just call me Coop. Never did I imagine I'd be telling this story. 2 years back, I inherited my grandfather's horse ranch in Willow Creek, Texas, not long after I lost my wife, Sarah, in a car crash that still torments my dreams. Now it's just me, my 8-year-old daughter Lily, and a group of mares more loyal than any watchdog. I work from home as a software engineer, which makes it possible for me to manage the ranch while also being present for Lily. The horses aren't just livestock, they're family, guardians, and without a doubt the most reliable security system money can't buy. That Tuesday morning had started like countless others. I was tossing hay bales into the truck, getting ready for a quick run into town for supplies. Lily showed up at the doorway in her favorite purple pajamas, hair sticking out in all directions like she'd defied gravity in her sleep. "Daddy, can I come with you?" she mumbled, still rubbing sleep from her eyes. I crouched down and gently tried to tame her wild curls, feeling that familiar stab of guilt every single parent knows too well. "Not today, sweetheart. I'll only be gone a couple of hours. And don't forget you've still got that math homework to finish." She gave me a reluctant nod, and I kissed her forehead, promising to bring back her favorite chocolate chip cookies from Miller's Bakery. As I pulled away, I could see her waving from the porch in the rearview mirror. That old anxious feeling twisted in my stomach, leaving her alone, even just for a short while, never sat right with me. The drive gave me time to reflect on how much life had shifted. This ranch had been Sarah's dream: open land, galloping horses, and our daughter growing up under wide skies instead of screens. After she passed, holding on to the ranch felt like holding on to a piece of her. Some days, the weight of it all felt unbearable, but the horses a broken bar, they seemed to know. Somehow, they stepped in, becoming fiercely protective of Lily. Daisy, our sharpest mare, had practically appointed herself as Lily's personal bodyguard. She trailed after her like a four-legged guardian angel. I was about 40 minutes into my trip when my phone vibrated, a security alert. I'd installed a camera system after a few minor incidents around the neighborhood. Expecting to see a wayward dog or a lost delivery truck, I tapped into the feed. Instead, what I saw chilled me to the core. 3 men in full hunting gear were crossing my property, rifles in hand, scouring the land like they had every right to be there. But they weren't alone. Striding ahead of them in a business suit was a woman I recognized immediately, a Beverly Thornfield, better known in local whispers as Karen. She was the self-crowned queen of our hoe, the kind who measured your grass with a ruler and made sure your Christmas lights were regulation approved. But this wasn't some petty complaint. This was a full-blown invasion. Armed strangers, on my land, and my little girl home by herself. I watched as Karen pointed toward the horses, clearly saying something to the hunters. Though there was no audio, her body language screamed arrogancy, as if she were authorizing them to take aim. The hunters nodded and began heading toward the main pasture, where my 20 mares grazed with their foals. That's when it hit me: Karen had somehow convinced them my private land was a legal hunting ground. Before I could react, the horses had already picked up on the threat. Mares are instinctively protective, especially during foaling season, and these 20 shared a sisterhood forged over years. What happened next was nothing short of military precision. Daisy let out a sharp warning cry, and every mare snapped to attention. In seconds, they'd created a solid barrier between the hunters and their Folsa 20 massive animals with eyes blazing and hooves ready. The men stood frozen, clearly not expecting this kind of resistance. One of them, a bulky guy in a red cape, lifted his rifle, hesitating. He never got the chance to aim. With a coordinated burst of motion, the mares charged not wildly, but strategically. They encircled the men, snorting, pawing at the ground, their body language pure intimidation. Panic set in fast. The hunters dropped their weapons and bolted, heading for the nearest cover, a tall oak tree at the pasture's edge. I couldn't help but laugh, even as anger surged in me. Watching 3 grown hunters scramble up that tree like scared alley cats was almost too ridiculous to believe. Their fancy gear lay forgotten in the mud. Below, the mares stood guard, unmoved. Daisy parked herself under the lowest branch, just beneath the biggest of the hunters, who clung to the bark like his life depended on it. Occasionally, she'd stretch up to nip at his boots, just to remind him he wasn't going anywhere. And Karen? That's where it got even better. The second she realized her hunting tour had gone sideways, she bailed her fast. I watched as she stumbled across the pasture, her high heels sinking into the mud. One shoe got sucked right off near the water trough, but she didn't even try to retrieve it. She hopped on one foot like a confused flamingo, eventually reaching her sleek silver BMW. In her panic, she dropped her purse, scattering its contents like confetti. But she didn't look back or just dove into her car and tore off, leaving a cloud of dust and disaster in her wake. That's when I hit the gas, my heart pounding. As I sped down the road, my thoughts boiled with anger and disbelief. How dare she bring strangers with guns onto my property? What gave her the right to risk my horse's lives or my daughter's? Without wasting another second, I dialed Sheriff Jackson Morrison, an old friend of my grandfather who'd always looked out for us. Jack, it's Coop Sterling. I've got a serious problem at the ranch. Trespassers, armed, and I think the HOA president's behind it. His voice turned sharp in an instant. I'm on my way. Don't do anything dumb until I get there. Those 20 minutes felt like a lifetime. When I finally pulled into the drive, it was like stepping into a bizarre movie scene. 3 grown hunters clinging to the limbs of our old oak tree like it was their last refuge, and 20 mares standing guard below like loyal sentries. Some of the horses had even settled down under the shade, clearly committed to a standoff. It was equal parts absurd and incredible. But what Karen didn't realize was that I had seen the whole thing. And what I discovered in the mess of her abandoned purse was going to make her wish she'd never set foot near the Sterling Ranch. Inside, I found Lily completely safe here, curled up at the kitchen table, quietly working on her math homework. The relief hit me so hard it nearly dropped me. I scooped her into my arms in a hug I didn't want to end. Daddy, you're squishing me, she giggled. I didn't care. I missed you, sweetheart, I whispered, brushing her hair from her face. Did you finish that math sheet? She beamed and nodded, holding up her notebook with rows of multiplication tables written in her careful handwriting. For a fleeting moment, life felt normal again, like the world outside hadn't gone completely off the rails. Sheriff Morrison pulled in about 15 minutes later, his patrol SUV kicking up a trail of dust. Jack had been like a second father to me during those summer visits to the ranch. He was the type of man who still believed in honor, in neighbors looking out for one another, qualities that felt rare these days. Well, Coop, he said, tipping his hat as he stepped out, I've seen a lot in my time, but I've never had to negotiate with a bunch of horses holding people hostage. We walked together toward the oak tree. The hunters were still up there, clinging for dear life. Gone was their tough guy actor. They looked more like overgrown raccoons than seasoned outdoorsmen. After some coaxing, we finally got the mares to give them enough space to climb down. Turns out, the hunters are Tommy Wright, Rick Valdez, and Eddie Kulskia were decent folks from Austin who had been completely duped. They showed us what looked like a legitimate hunting permit, professionally printed, stamped with what appeared to be official seals. She told us the landowner had signed a contract for guided hunts, Tommy explained, sheepishly wiping mud from his pants. Said she was the authorized rep. Everything seemed legal. We even paid her $300 each. But here's where things took a dark turn. While Jack was taking their statements, I sifted through the contents of Karen's spilled purse. Among the expected stuff a lipstick, keys, breath mincer. I found something that chilled me, 50 grand in cash, bundled tight with rubber bands, a burner phone filled with Spanish text messages, and a small plastic bag of white powder that definitely wasn't flour. Just then, Maya Delco arrived, my longtime friend and one of the sharpest animal law attorneys in Texas. She'd come as soon as I called. One glance at the powder and her expression darkened. Coop, this looks like cocaine. And that much cash? This isn't just some overreach. This is serious. She carefully read through the burner phone's texts, holding it with a tissue. Her brow furrowed deeper with every message. These texts mention a location for and someone called Alfay. This isn't random. Karen's tied into something criminal. Your ranch might be part of a larger operation. The weight of her words sank in like a stone in my chest. This wasn't just about entitled neighbors anymore. We were standing in the middle of something dangerous, or something organized. Sheriff Morrison didn't need much convincing. He made several phone calls, speaking in low tones about narcotics and possibly needing federal backup. Within an hour, things started unraveling. Turns out, Karen had secretly bought 3 nearby ranches, all in cash. Every transaction had been pushed through by the same county official, Harold Blackwood, the chairman of our local board. Too many coincidences. Jack's grim face told me everything. He'd seen this kind of deep-rooted corruption before. Later that night, after statements had been taken and the chaos had simmered down, I stood on the front porch, staring at the field. Daisy and the other mares were back to grazing under the silver moonlight, as if they hadn't just orchestrated the most badass security takedown in Willow Creek history. Lily padded out in her pajamas and quietly slipped her hand into mine. Dad, you're broken bar. Why were those bad people here today? She asked, looking up at me with those clear, innocent eyes. I hesitated, trying to explain without scaring her. Some folks made a bad choice about where they could go, honey. But the horses kept us safe, just like always. She nodded, thoughtful. You look scared, she said softly. But I'm not. You didn't protect Mom, you broken bar, but you always protect me and a horse family. Her words hit me like a gut punch, soft, honest, and true. I'd held back tears for a long time. That night, I finally let them come. Karen struck back with the speed and venom of a rattlesnake. At 7 a.m. sharp, my phone buzzed with a robotic voice from the Willow Creek Homeowners Association, informing me of an urgent complaint lodged against my property. By 8 a.m., my mailbox held 3 letters, each more absurd than the last. The first came from the HOA, demanding the removal of dangerous livestock within 30 days. The second was from County Animal Control, scheduling an emergency inspection. The third, thick with legal jargon, was from a law firm I'd never heard of, threatening a lawsuit over alleged public endangerment and community safety violations. But Karen wasn't done. By noon, she had launched a full-scale smear campaign on Facebook. Her post, long-winded and laced with dramatic flair, accused me of harboring violent animals that posed a threat to innocent families and harmless hunters. She had uploaded heavily edited photos that twisted the truth. My peaceful mares appeared rabid and aggressive. To make matters worse, she'd rounded up a few panicked testimonials from so-called concerned citizens, fueling the narrative with outright lies. The comment section turned into a digital war zone. Old neighbors, people who knew the real story, rallied to my defense. Mrs. Peterson, my kind-hearted elderly neighbor, stood up for me with more fire than I'd ever seen. But her voice was quickly drowned out by a flood of new residents blindly parroting Karen's lies, demanding immediate action. Sheriff Morrison gave it to me straight. Karen wasn't just looking to cause trouble, she was systematically trying to force me off my own land. She was using her title as HOA president and her shady ties to Harold Blackwood like weapons in a legal arsenal. She's playing a long game, Coop, Jack warned. And I'm starting to believe your land isn't just convenient to here, it's crucial to something much bigger. I watched my daughter in the pasture, laughing as the same horses Karen had demonized nuzzled her shoulder. And in that moment, I understood the mistake Karen had made. She thought I was just another pushover neighbor or someone she could pressure into compliance. She had no idea she'd just declared war on a man who had already lost everything on See a Broken Bar and wasn't about to let that happen again. The next day, Maya and Jack returned with findings that changed everything. Maya stepped onto the porch, her face pale and tense, holding a thick manila folder. "We need to talk," she said, sitting down across from me while Lily played with Daisy nearby. She wasted no time. "Karen Thornfield isn't who she pretends to be. She has a past too, and it's a whole lot darker than we thought." Sheriff Morrison arrived moments later, the crackle of routine dispatch calls coming from his patrol radios sounding strangely irrelevant compared to what we were about to uncover. What Maya had pieced together sounded more like a crime novel than real life. 3 years ago, Karen had been Beverly Thornfield, a struggling single mother caught in a bitter custody battle over her daughter, Emily. Her wealthy ex-husband had hired a team of lawyers to destroy her credibility in court, portraying her as unstable and dangerous. The legal fight drained her financially and emotionally, until there was nothing left but resentment and desperation. According to court documents, Maya said, flipping through the file, she lost everything: her daughter, her home, her bank accounts. The final ruling even described her as exhibiting threatening behavior and obsessive control tendencies. That was when Miguel Santos appeared. Santos, according to Jack's law enforcement sources, was a mid-level figure in a Mexican cartel responsible for acquiring property for laundering drug money. He'd approached Karen when she was vulnerable, offering what looked like a lifeline: legitimate work as a real estate consultant for his development company. She probably thought it was her chance to rebuild her life, Maya said quietly, watching Lily stroke Daisy's mane. A way to earn enough to appeal her case and maybe win back Emily. Santa seized her in slowly a small, legal tasks at first. But before long, she was caught in a web too deep to escape. Her HOA presidency wasn't about enforcing lawn codes or barking dog complaints, so it was about territory, surveillance, control. Every complaint she filed, every neighbor she drove out, every shady land deal, it was all part of a coordinated plan to claim property for criminal purposes. "Look at this," Jack said, spreading a map across the porch table. Every ranch Karen's acquired with Blackwood's help lines up in a corridor stretching from the southern border to the major arteries headed into Dallas and Houston. It's a pipeline. But the most disturbing detail came from deep in Karen's family court records. Her ex-husband's lawyers had documented a chilling escalation in her behavior. She had allegedly hired private investigators to follow him and his family, and had made threats about making him disappear. 6 months after the custody ruling, he died in a car crash that the police labeled an accident. But given what we now knew, it was impossible to overlook the timing. "Maya," I said, my voice low, "if Karen is capable of that, a broken bar, what might she do to people who threaten her operation now?" That afternoon, as Maya buried herself in case law and legal precedents, I found myself having an unexpected heart-to-heart with Lilia, a conversation that reminded me exactly why I couldn't back down. She'd barely touched her sandwich at lunch, her eyes fixed on the horses through the kitchen window. "Daddy?" she said softly. "Mrs. Peterson told me that mean lady wants to take our horses away. Is it true?" I knelt beside her and looked into her worried eyes, choosing my words carefully. "Some people are trying to cause trouble for us, sweetheart. But you continued a broken bar. You know what?" I told Lily, kneeling beside her chair, my voice steady. "I'm not going to let anything happen to you, our family, our home, or our horses." She nodded, her expression serious beyond her years. Then, unexpectedly, she asked, Are you going to be like those detectives on TV and figure out all her secrets? Despite the storm we were in, her innocent question brought a smile to my face. Something like that, kiddo. Want to help me build a clue board? For the next hour, we sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by colored pencils, glue sticks, and poster board. Lily called it her super secret detective board, and it quickly became a masterpiece here, complete with horses wearing cartoon detective hats and arrows pointing at Karen's photo. That evening, Mrs. Peterson dropped by, and what she shared filled in the last piece of the puzzle we'd been missing. She'd lived in Willow Creek for 4 decades, so long enough to remember everything, especially when Karen first arrived. She wasn't always this way, she said gently, accepting a cup of tea and settling into my grandfather's old rocker. When Beverly, her real name, first moved in, she was frail, nervous. You could tell she'd been through something awful. Said she lost custody of her daughter. The pain clung to her like a shadow. Mrs. Peterson had tried to help, inviting her to church, offering kindness. But over time, the woman changed. About 2 years ago, everything shifted. Fancy clothes, flashy car, and anger like I've never seen. It was like something had taken root in her. The transformation made sense now. But the revelation Maya uncovered later that night put everything into a sharper, darker focus. She called me from her office, voice tight with urgency. Coop, I found something that changes the game. Karen's connection to Harold Blackwood wasn't just professional. Blackwood had been buying up land along the same route Karen had been managing and doing it through layers of shell companies and all cash deals that screamed money laundering. But the bombshell, Karen's ex-husband, yes, the same one from the brutal custody battle, he had been scheduled to testify about corruption in the county planning office. Just days before the court date, a broken bar, he died in a suspicious car crash. He'd found something damning about Blackwood's land acquisitions, Maya said, and he was going public. The realization hit me like a sledgehammer. Karen wasn't just playing with fire, she was consumed by it. And as much as she might have been complicit, it was equally clear she'd been trapped. She was part victim, part weapon. But standing on my porch that night, watching the horses settle in beneath the lavender dusk sky, I knew this changed nothing. Her pain didn't excuse her actions. Karen saw you, Sammy, my daughter, and this land not just as obstacles, but as threats to the only thing she still cared about, getting her daughter back. And people fighting to reclaim lost children? They could be the most unpredictable, most dangerous adversaries of all. Sheriff Morrison's warning echoed in my head as I checked the locks and rearmed the security system before bed. Son, this isn't just neighborly drama anymore. We're knee-deep in organized crime, maybe even murder. And we're dealing with a woman who's got nothing left to lose. The next seismic shift came with a single phone call. Sheriff Morrison hadn't even finished his morning coffee when DEA agent Sophia Martinez reached out. She was direct, professional, and didn't waste words. Karen Thornfield, she explained, had been on their radar for 6 months. The DEA had connected her to a far-reaching operation known as El Cartel Verde, a sophisticated drug trafficking network operating under the guise of legitimate business. These aren't street-level criminals, Agent Martinez told us that afternoon during an emergency meeting at the ranch. She was in her 30s, with sharp eyes and a calm authority that told me she'd seen hell and lived to talk about it. Their business people professional, careful, and methodical. They invest in real estate, start legal ventures, and build transportation channels that span entire states. A broken bar all under the radar. She spread aerial maps and surveillance images across our kitchen table while Lily colored nearby, her detective board suddenly looking less like a child's art project and more like a low-budget version of a federal task force. Karen Thornfield and Harold Blackwood are ideal assets for this operation, Martinez explained, pointing to marked zones on the satellite images. Blackwood has political leverage. He can push zoning changes and fast-track land transfers. Karen, she controls the social ecosystem, intimidates residents, files complaints, and silences potential whistleblowers. Everything began to click into place. Every dispute, every random incident. It had all been strategic, coordinated, and maliciously effective. Then Agent Martinez dropped a detail that turned my stomach. The DEA had been monitoring strange traffic patterns around several rural properties. Mine wasn't just one of the locations, it was the prime target. Your land sits at the junction of 3 major highways, she said, tapping the map. It's remote enough to avoid surveillance, big enough for storage, and looks legitimate thanks to your horse operation. Increased truck activity wouldn't raise eyebrows here. It's the perfect cover. Maya leaned in, her mind already racing. They're trying to force Coop off the ranch so they can finalize their smuggling network, she said. That hunting stunt wasn't just harassment, it was the opening move in a larger, calculated plan. As we absorbed that horror, Agent Martinez laid out evidence implicating Harold Blackwood in a years-long scheme to manipulate land use, zoning codes, and tax assessments. He'd been constructing a crime highway stretching from the Mexican border to the heart of Dallas. He's used his office to rezone these lands for agricultural use, she said, grim-faced. That reduces oversight, limits inspections, and makes it easier to move heavy traffic without attracting attention. Meanwhile, he's inflating tax valuations on targeted properties to drive legacy families out. The scope of it was staggering. Dozens of families uprooted not by economic hardship, but by an intentional, criminal effort. But the final blow came with a revelation about Karen's true timeline. We believe Karen was initially brought in as an unknowing pawn, Agent Martinez said, pulling out grainy surveillance photos of Karen in meetings we now knew were cartel-related. A broken bar. With unknown men in sharp suits. Her ex-husband had uncovered irregularities in local land deals and was preparing to blow the whistle. His death wasn't accidental, it was a calculated assassination meant to silence him and gain leverage over Karen. They killed him, Agent Martinez said bluntly, and convinced Karen that her only option to keep her daughter, Emily, safe was to cooperate. The surveillance photos revealed Karen's unsettling transformation. From a devastated widow to a woman with steely resolve, the change was gradual but chilling. My stomach turned when Agent Martinez explained what came next. El Cartel Verde has already funneled over 200 kilograms of fentanyl into this area, some of it hidden on your property, Coop, for 4 months. She added, they've been using your ranch as a storage site, burying narcotics in areas your horses don't normally roam. Maya went pale as the realization hit. That means Lily's been playing near lethal drugs, she whispered. Martinez nodded, her face grim. Even minimal exposure can be fatal. The fact that your horses instinctively avoided those spots probably saved her life. The poisoning of my horses wasn't just sabotage, it was a deliberate move to eliminate anything that might expose the cartel's activity. Karen's been trying to erase any evidence, the agent continued. The poison patches of grass, those were former stash sites. She's been cleaning up after the cutler, burning the fingerprints off a crime scene you didn't even know existed. It shook me to the core. This wasn't about land anymore. Karen wasn't just trying to force us out, she was covering up the presence of a criminal empire, right under my daughter's feet. That night, as we regrouped to plan our next move, Agent Martinez laid out the truth in no uncertain terms. Harold Blackwood has already committed murder to keep this hidden. Karen is caught in the middle, terrified and desperate. That makes her volatilely unpredictable and lethal. She's got everything to gain and nothing to lose by taking you out, she warned. Maya gripped my hand. The weight of our situation was suffocating. Coop, she said, your land has been turned into a hub for organized crime. They won't just give up because we know what's going on. Leaving wasn't an option. This land wasn't just soil and fence, it was my family's legacy, my daughter's future. Agent Martinez offered witness protection, a new name, a new life here far away from all of this. But I couldn't walk away. My horses stood their ground when armed men invaded, I said. Now it's my turn to protect them. That night, as I tucked Lily into bed and listened to her excited chatter about helping solve a real mystery, it struck me Karen had made a critical mistake. She thought I was just another obstacle. She had no idea I was a man who'd already lost everything on See a Broken Bar and wasn't about to let that happen again. I was ready to fight her with everything I had. The next morning, our small war room came to life. Agent Martinez, Maya, Sheriff Morrison, and I outlined a plan that would either save you or get us all killed. It was deceptively simple. Turn Karen's playbook against her. We need to smoke them out, Agent Martinez said, laying out a spread of surveillance equipment across the kitchen table. Lily, eating cereal nearby, pretended not to listen, though I knew she was hanging on every word. They've operated in the shadows for too long. If we push them into the spotlight, they'll panic, and that's when they'll make mistakes. The heart of the plan: a live-streamed community event disguised as a feel-good ranch day. The most, it would look like a celebration. But to the cartel, it would send one clear message: we know. The event was scheduled for that Saturday. I had just enough time to rally federal support while keeping up the illusion of a spontaneous gathering. Maya handled the legal side, ensuring everything we did would hold up in court. Sheriff Morrison worked with state and federal teams to set up a secure perimeter. The key is subtlety, Agent Martinez stressed in our final prep meeting. If Karen even suspects this is a trap, she'll either flee or strike. I couldn't help but note the irony. We were using Karen's obsession with spectacle and social media to unravel her criminal empire. Saturday arrived, bright and clear like the calm before a storm. By 10 a.m., nearly 50 people had gathered at Sterling Ranch, lured by Maya's online campaign about community healing and the power of horses. Mrs. Peterson brought cookies. Children ran through the grass. Even some of Karen's old allies paid, a curiosity outweighing loyalty. Daisy and the other mayors stood proud, posing for photos as kids giggled and stroked their manes. At noon, the live stream began. Over 1,000 viewers tuned in, and the number kept climbing. I kept my voice light and welcoming as Maya handled the camera. Welcome, everyone, I said, smiling into the lens. To Sterling Rancho, where horses heal hearts, and community means everything. I gestured toward the pastures, where families laughed and children ran freely beneath the golden Texas sun. Today isn't just about showcasing our beautiful horses, I said with a smile. It's about celebrating the spirit of Willow Creek, the kind of neighborly bond that makes this town truly special. What the audience couldn't see, however, were the plainclothes federal agents discreetly stationed around the ranch, a broken bar, or the tension riding just beneath my voice as I watched the driveway, waiting. 20 minutes into the live stream, she arrived. Karen. She pulled up in a sleek silver BMW and stepped out with the confident air of someone who still believed she had the upper hand. Dressed for war in a razor-sharp suit, her hair perfectly styled, she wore a smile so polished it gleamed yet never touched her eyes. With practiced poise, she strode toward the camera, voice dripping with manufactured warmth. I'm so pleased to see Cooper opening his property to public scrutiny, she said, making sure to angle herself front and center in the frame. As your HOA president, I've had long-standing concerns about safety here. I think transparency is exactly what this community needs. It was a flawless performance. But I could see it behind her eyes. She was calculating every angle, every face, every detail. And then something completely unexpected happened. 12-year-old Emma Peterson, a Mrs. Peterson's soft-spoken granddaughter visiting for the weekend, tugged gently at my sleeve during a break in Karen's monologue. Mr. Coop, she whispered, can I tell everyone about the buried treasure? At first, I almost brushed it off as childhood fantasy. But she went on. 3 months ago, I was staying with Grandma. There was a big storm, and I couldn't sleep. I saw men with flashlights digging by your horse barn around midnight. I thought they were hiding pirate treasure, a broken bar, so I marked the spots on my phone to find it later. Agent Martinez, monitoring from the barn, immediately grasped the gravity of Emma's words. Within minutes, federal agents equipped with ground-penetrating radar were moving toward the GPS markers Emma had saved. The live stream audience, unaware of the deeper context, watched in fascination, thinking it was a spontaneous treasure hunt. But what unfolded was something far more serious. Ladies and gentlemen, I announced to the now thriving audience, see over 5,000 strong. It appears young Emma may have uncovered something very significant. The irony was heavy. A child's curiosity about a fairy tale treasure was about to crack open the largest narcotics storage ring in Texas. The first find confirmed everything Agent Martinez had warned us about: 50 kilograms of pure fentanyl, worth approximately $2 million, vacuum sealed and hidden in waterproof containers. More sites followed. In total, federal agents unearthed 4 separate caches, each filled with vast quantities of drugs buried beneath the very land where my daughter had played. The live stream had become something no one could look away from, the real-time takedown of a sophisticated drug trafficking network that had been hiding in plain sight. Karen's facade crumbled. Her expression, once so composed, shattered the moment the second stash was uncovered. Panic flickered across her face as her empire was exposed. Live. To a national audience. "This is a setup," she hissed, stepping toward me. The mask was gone. "You don't know what you've just done to yourself, a broken bar, or your family." That's when Agent Martinez stepped forward, badge on display. "Beverly Thornfield," she said loudly and clearly, "you're under arrest for conspiracy to distribute controlled substances, money laundering, and accessory to murder." Karen didn't go quietly. Even as the agents began to cuff her, she turned to the camera, her eyes like steel and her voice filled with venom. "You think this is over, Cooper?" she snarled. "You don't know how deep this goes. You don't know who else is involved. When I make my call from jail, you'll realize here some wars can't be won with cameras and farm animals." As they led her away, the weight of her final words pressed down hard. We had won the battle, broken bar, but the war was still ahead. 3 hours after the live stream ended, and after federal teams had cleared the last of the crime scene, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. It was Karina calling from the county jail, cashing in her one guaranteed phone call. But this wasn't the same icy Karen who'd glared into the lens earlier. Her voice now trembled, touched with something I'd never heard before. "Fear, Cooper," she said, "you need to listen carefully. I never wanted to hurt you, a broken bar or Lily. But if I don't check in with my handlers by midnight, they'll know I've been compromised. They'll send a cleanup crew." She swallowed hard. "They'll come for everyone who knows about the operation. That includes your family." Agent Martinez had warned us about these that organized crime groups often responded to arrests with swift, brutal violence. But nothing could have prepared me for what came next. Because El Cartel Verde wasn't just dangerous, they were methodical. And Karina Broken Bar, she wasn't their only inside connection. Agent Martinez explained that the cartel operated under a strict cell structure, where each member had scheduled check-ins. Missing a contact would automatically trigger containment protocols designed to eliminate any loose ends. "Miguel Santos is already on his way from Mexico with a team of specialists," she whispered urgently. "These aren't street criminals, Coopera, they're military-trained assassins who specialize in cleaning up security breaches. You've got maybe 6 hours before they arrive. And when they do, they won't just kill you, they'll make it look like a home invasion gone wrong. Lily will become a casualty of war." Sheriff Morrison and Agent Martinez immediately activated emergency protocols. But the federal response system wasn't designed for the rapid deployment we needed out here in rural Texas. "The nearest FBI tactical team is in Dallas, 4 hours away," Agent Martinez explained grimly, coordinating with federal authorities. "State police are setting up roadblocks on the major highways, but if these operatives come through back roads or private airstrips, they could already be in the area." Maya had taken Lily to the safest place she could think of, the underground bunker my grandfather built during the Cold War. It was stocked with supplies and accessible only through a hidden entrance in our basement. The irony wasn't lost on me. A shelter originally built to protect against nuclear war might now save my daughter from drug cartel assassins. The first sign of trouble came at sunset when our security cameras detected movement along the eastern perimeter of the property. Agent Martinez, who had stayed on the ranch as part of our protection detail, immediately recognized the tactical formation of the approaching figures. 3 men, professional spacing, night vision equipment, she reported through her radio as she took position near the main house. "This isn't random violence. It's a precision operation designed to leave no witnesses." Sheriff Morrison positioned himself near the barn with 2 state troopers, while I reluctantly took shelter in the bunker with Lily and Maya, armed only with my grandfather's old hunting rifle and a desperate determination to protect my family. What happened next felt like something out of a war movie, except the stakes were my daughter's life, and the battlefield was the ranch where I'd learned to ride horses as a child. The cartel operatives moved with military precision, using suppressed weapons and coordinated tactics to systematically clear the property. We could hear muffled gunfire through the bunker's ventilation system as Agent Martinez and state police engaged the intruders in running battles across the pastures and outbuildings. "Daddy, why are the bad men trying to hurt us?" Lily whispered, clutching her favorite stuffed horse while explosions echoed overhead. I held her close, whispering reassurances I wasn't sure I believed, while Maya monitored police communications on a battery-powered radio. The turning point came when the cartel operatives made a critical tactical error. They underestimated the intelligence and loyalty of our horses. Daisy and her 19 sisters had been grazing peacefully in the main pasture when the shooting started. Instead of fleeing in panic, as the attackers expected, they responded with the same protective instincts that had saved us from the hunters weeks earlier. The mares formed a defensive formation around the barn where Sheriff Morrison was pinned down, creating a living shield that confused the cartel's night vision equipment and disrupted their carefully planned assault routes. "The horses are hurting the shooters," Agent Martinez reported over the radio in amazement. "They're driving them toward our positions like they're protecting their territory." 2 cartel operatives, cut off from their escape route by 20 angry horses, made the fatal mistake of trying to fight their way through the herd instead of around it. What followed was natural justice no courtroom could have delivered more effectively. Daisy led her sisters in a coordinated charge, trampling the first operative and cornering the second against the equipment shed, where Sheriff Morrison apprehended him without firing a shot. The third operative, witnessing the fate of his companions, attempted to flee across the open pasture but was pursued by mares who seemed to understand exactly what he'd tried to do to their human family. Agent Martinez later said it was the most unusual arrest of her career, handcuffing a professional assassin while 20 horses stood guard like a jury of peers. The captured operative, facing federal charges that would put him away for life, immediately began cooperating with authorities, revealing details about El Cartel Verde's operations that investigators had been chasing for years. "Your horses just helped us crack the biggest drug trafficking case in Texas history," Agent Martinez told me as dawn broke over our battered but victorious ranch. Even as federal agents processed the crime scene and paramedics treated the wounded, I knew Karen's story was far from over. The woman who had terrorized our community and nearly destroyed my family sat in a jail cell facing decades in prison, but she had one final card to play. And when she played it, everything we thought we knew about her motives and the scope of the conspiracy would be turned upside down once again. Karen's final revelation came 2 weeks after the assault on our ranch, when she requested a meeting that would forever change how I understood her motivations and the true extent of the conspiracy we'd uncovered. Sitting in the county jail's visitor room, she looked smaller, some with a fierce desperation replaced by something that looked almost like relief. "Cooper, I need you to understand something before I go to federal prison," she began, her voice steady for the first time since I'd known her. "Everything I did, the harassment, the poisoning, even bringing those hunters to your ranch, it was never about hurting you or Lily. I was trying to save you." Maya, who had come with me to the meeting, leaned forward with the sharp attention of a lawyer sensing a crucial piece of missing evidence. The truth, when it finally emerged, was more complex and heartbreaking than any of us had imagined. Karen had never wanted to become a criminal. She'd been coerced into cooperating after El Cartel Verde murdered her ex-husband and threatened to kill her daughter Emily if she didn't comply with their land acquisition plans. They showed me photos of Emily at school, at dance class, walking home with friends, Karen explained. tears streaming down her face for the first time in our acquaintance. Miguel Santos made it clear that her daughter's safety depended on complete cooperation, and that included delivering your ranch to them by any means necessary. But as Karen learned more about the cartel's operations, she realized that my family wouldn't just lose our home, we would become loose ends that needed to be eliminated once the property transfer was complete. The poisoning of my horses, Karen revealed, had been her desperate attempt to force us to leave before the cartel decided we knew too much to live. I thought if I could make the ranch seem dangerous and uninhabitable, you'd sell to Harold Blackwood and take Lily somewhere safe, she said, her voice breaking under the weight of her confession. I knew about the buried drugs, the planned assassinations, about everything they intended to do once they had full control of your property. The only way I could think to protect you was to make you want to leave willingly. Her plan had been heartbreakingly simple: create enough legal and safety issues to force our departure, while making it seem like she was just an overzealous HOA president rather than a desperate mother trying to save innocent lives. Agent Martinez, who had been tracking the case's aftermath, provided the final pieces of the puzzle during our debriefing. Harold Blackwood has agreed to cooperate fully in exchange for a reduced sentence, she reported, spreading documents across the conference table at the federal building. His testimony, combined with the evidence recovered from your ranch and Karen's statement, has allowed us to dismantle the entire El Cartel Verde network. We've arrested 23 operatives across 5 states, seized over $40 million in assets, and prevented enough fentanyl from reaching the streets to save thousands of lives. The scope of the operation we'd accidentally exposed was staggering: a sophisticated criminal enterprise that had operated for years under the cover of legitimate business transactions. But the most surprising revelation came when Agent Martinez explained Karen's role in the cartel's ultimate downfall. Mrs. Thornfield had been documenting everything, producing boxes of evidence she had secretly collected over months of forced cooperation, of financial records, meeting locations, communication protocols, personnel information. She had created a comprehensive intelligence file that she planned to hand over to authorities once she figured out how to protect her daughter. Your live stream gave her the perfect opportunity to expose the operation while ensuring maximum public witnesses to prevent retaliation. Karen had been playing a longer, more dangerous game than any of us realized, positioning herself as the key to bringing down the entire network, while trying to save both our families in the process. The legal resolution was swift and decisive. Karen received a 10-year sentence with the possibility of parole in 5 years, so a remarkably lenient outcome considering the charges against her. Her cooperation with federal authorities and the evidence she provided were instrumental in securing convictions against the cartel's leadership. The judge specifically noted her efforts to protect innocent civilians during sentencing. Harold Blackwood received 25 years without parole for his role in multiple murders and money laundering operations, while Miguel Santos and his surviving operatives faced life sentences for their crimes. Justice has been served, Agent Martinez told me after the final hearing. But more importantly, a mother's love ultimately saved dozens of lives. The aftermath brought unexpected healing to our community and family. Lily, who had been traumatized by the violence but inspired by the horse's bravery, began writing letters to Emily Thornfield, Karen's daughter, offering friendship and understanding between two children forever changed by their parents' choices. Mrs. Peterson organized a community fund to help families displaced by the cartel's land acquisition scheme, while the state of Texas officially recognized our 20 mayors as honorary law enforcement animals for their role in apprehending dangerous criminals. Daisy, our lead mayor, even received a custom badge that she wore with obvious pride during the ceremony. 6 months later, as I watched Lily play safely in the pasture where so much drama had unfolded, I reflected on the profound lessons our ordeal had taught us. Sometimes the people we see as our greatest enemies are themselves victims of circumstances beyond their control. Sometimes justice doesn't come from courts or laws but from the courage to stand up for what's right even when the odds seem impossible. And sometimes, the most unlikely heroes are whether protective horses or desperate mothers making impossible choices emerge from the darkest situations to save the day. Our ranch became a symbol of community resilience and the power of ordinary people to overcome extraordinary evil. Visitors from around the country came to meet the horses that had helped solve one of the largest drug trafficking cases in American history. Lily delighted in giving tours, explaining how our horse family had protected us when it mattered most. Karen and I began corresponding through letters, an unlikely friendship born from mutual respect and a shared commitment to protecting our children. Even from prison, she continued to provide information that helped authorities track down remaining cartel operatives, earning sentence reductions and the possibility of rebuilding her relationship with Emily upon release. The Sterling Ranch story proves that heroes come in all forms, of four-legged and two-legged, expected and unexpected, perfect and flawed. In a world that often feels divided and dangerous, our experience reminded everyone who heard it that love, courage, and community can triumph over even the most sophisticated evil. If this story moved you, please like this video and subscribe to Harper Stories for more incredible tales of ordinary people doing extraordinary things.